what the results were. That's basically what I'm doing. But it'll give you a chance to see several different places where I've worked in different parts of the world. I just want to say before I begin, I'm no great publisher, but I have 3 books that I have published. This is on health, and this one here, that's the hospital boat that I worked on in South America. My wife wrote this book. She fell off my motorcycle and broke her right femur in 12 pieces. And so while she's in the hospital 22 days, she wrote this book, Miracles on the Meta. The Meta is the name of the river where we operated our hospital boat. And so while she was there 22 days, she wrote that book. But the book is about me. And this, I published this book, and I wrote 150 poems about home and heaven and nature. And I didn't bring very many with me, just samples to show what I have done. And now we'll turn the projector on. And this is my wife, Ursula. She's the mother of my 8 children. We were married 57 years. And I took her with me to Zambia, Africa. And she never came back. She died of one little mosquito bite. In 4 days from the time she got bit by a mosquito, she was dead. 2 days with fever and chills, and 2 days in a coma, died on the way to the hospital. I had the same malaria in Zambia, Africa, and I couldn't help her because I was in a coma when they took her to the hospital. And she died before they got to the hospital. It was interesting, they carried her, they took her in the back of a pickup truck on a mattress. They carried her in and laid her on the floor in the waiting room. And another patient that was there waiting, when the doctor came out, she said, "Hey, doctor, you got to check this lady. I've been watching her. She hasn't been breathing now for 10 minutes. The doctor checked her and pronounced her dead right there in the hospital. And I wasn't able to bring her back. I had her cremated because it would have cost $20,000 to bring the body back in a casket, so I had her cremated. It was kind of interesting, the cremation. When I went with them to the crematoria, I was sick. I couldn't stand up. I was still overcoming the malaria. Thank God I didn't die. A nurse saved my life by the grace of God. And so they took me in a wheelchair to identify my wife's body before they cremated it. And I noticed I followed the undertaker after I identified the body, then I followed them to the crematoria, and on the gate there's a big swastika. And I thought, I'm going to ask the undertaker, did you buy this crematoria in Auschwitz, Poland? He said, yes. It's the same one that many, many Jews were burned in. So my wife had to share with some of the Jews. I had a little railroad car. There's a big old steel furnace, a big smokestack, 24 feet high and about 4 by 4 foot square. And outside they had a small railroad car with a railroad track going into the furnace. And they had a big pile of wood 4 feet long, and in this railroad car about 20 feet long, and they just set the casket up on top with the body in it. And they rolled the little railroad car right into the furnace, shut the door, and lit the fire. He said, come back in 24 hours and pick up the little box of ashes. So anyway, life is interesting. Life has to go on. There's too much light. I don't know if we can lower any more lights, on this side especially. This is my wife and children, and the whole thing, my wife and children, and the big guy in the back with the blue shirt was a patient of mine. Thank you, that's better. He was a patient of mine, and I had given a lecture in Rome, New York, and his wife was a dental hygienist. They had been divorced 16 years, and he was dubbed as schizophrenic, and he was in a mental hospital down in Florida, in Chattahoochee, Florida. And his wife heard me give a lecture on health, and she didn't say a word to me. She asked the president of the health club where I gave the lecture, is this guy serious? Asking about me. And he said, yeah, he's the best there is in the field of natural medicine. She never talked to me. She went down to Florida, had her husband discharged from the hospital, telling them that she's going to take him to another mental institution. That was me. I was crazy to take him on, but I did. She just brought him and dropped him off, said, I got a patient for you. Like I said, they've been divorced for 16 years. He was a school teacher. And anyway, I took him on, and my wife and I and children lived in a 403-acre farm up in the Adirondack Mountains in New York State, upstate New York. And some of the crazy things he did, but anyway, he got better. And what I want to say about this case was that I discovered that many people that are schizophrenic hate somebody. And to find out who they hate and get them straightened out with that person, the schizophrenia is gone. Isn't that interesting? That's a different way of healing. So I found out that it was his wife that he hated. That's why they divorced. That's why she put him in a mental institution. I went down with him, finally, after I took care of him 7 months, and he got better. They took me down to Florida to their place, and everything went fine for a few days. Then he and she got arguing, and he got mad, same old schizophrenia coming back. He got mad, jumped in the car, and started spinning rubber, backing out of the driveway, right into traffic. I knew I was going to have a wild ride, but I grabbed the passenger door and I jumped in. I knew it was a death trap, but I knew I had to help this guy. He went 90 miles an hour down through the streets in Chattahoochee, Florida, and Lake Okeechobee. And the day before, he and his wife and I had a little picnic lunch in a park in the city. He was doing 90 miles an hour right through the red lights, right down the main street in the middle of town. And very quietly, I said to him, Josh, his name was Joshua Seaver. I said, Josh, I'm ready to die. I'm not afraid to die. I love the Lord, and the Lord loves me, and I plan to be saved and the earth made new. I said, you're not ready to die. God doesn't want you to die now. I said, just take your foot off the gas pedal, just slow down a little bit. I said, about 2 blocks down on the left-hand side is the road where you took me into the park the other day, yesterday. And I said, very carefully, pull in there slowly so we won't roll over, and go back to the same picnic table. We'll talk about this thing. So he slowed down, pulled into the park. We sat and talked a couple of hours. He went back and apologized to his wife. Anyway, things worked out good after that. And so it appears like I got another picture here later of a guy that was schizophrenic in a mental institution and was discharged, sent home with me. And I took care of him 7 months, and he got better. I'll show you his picture. But anyway, this is my wife and children from left to right, in the back row is Joyce, and then Ursula, my wife, and then Joshua, the patient, and then me, and then David, and you know David, he's been here, hasn't he? Yeah, he's my son. And then Calvin Jr., Calvin and the little guy on the left are the only ones out of the church. All my children are still health reformers and Seventh-day Adventists, except those two boys. And then around the corner in a white dress is Gloria, and then Marvin, and then Stephen. Stephen is a nature doctor like myself in Texas, and he married my receptionist nurse in the hospital in Mexico, and he's now running, they've been married 40 years. He's running a little clinic down in Mexico. And then comes Melody, and then Laverne, the little guy. Laverne is now 56 years old. Joyce is 69 years old, and she just got married about 2 weeks ago. And she and her husband leaving Wednesday. We won't get to see them, they'll be gone. We're going down to Brazil, and they'll be gone for a month on a honeymoon. So, yeah, Stephen's in Alvarado, Texas, and he's doing the same thing I do. I've been doing it for years, natural medicine, treating people. All right, this is my wife, Ursula, and like I said, we were together 57 years, and then she died in Africa. This is the farm, 403 acres, where we lived, and on the left is my youngest son. He's 10 years old. No, he was 11 years old. In this picture, weighed 80 pounds. The one in the yellow shirt on the right was a patient of mine, and he was 10 years old and weighed 300 pounds. And I put him on a 3-day fast, and when he got done, he said, Mrs. Dence, what are you going to give me to eat? And she said, what do you like? It has to be fruit only. And, he said, I like apples. She said, okay, I'll give you apples. How many do you want? He said, 20.
Oh, my.
My wife washed up 20 apples and put them on the table. He ate one apple and half another. He said, Mrs. Dence, I'm full. I can't eat anymore. He didn't realize your stomach shrinks when you go on a water fast. This guy, the Seventh-day Adventist, Bob Sweat, and he had a wife and 4 children, but when he got polio, his wife left him. And he was 6 years in an iron lung with polio, quadriplegic, and they brought him right out of the iron lung after 6 years to my house. He's 6'4", weighed 67 pounds. A real live skeleton. He had a tracheotomy, he couldn't talk. He had a feeding tube, he couldn't eat. They had to put liquid down the tube. He was on all kinds of life support, 24 hours artificial breathing, 12 hours rocking bed. Do you know what a rocking bed is? When the bed is like a teeter-totter, when the head goes down, the intestines hit against the lungs, knock the air out. When the feet go down, the intestines pull away from the lungs, air in. Head down, air out. Feet down, air in. That artificial breathing, 12 hours at night with a rocking bed, and then he had 12 hours a day with a respirator. What a horrible satanic machine that was. He paid $610 to the March of Dimes for this respirator. One Sabbath morning, he was on the respirator 12 hours during the day and the rocking bed 12 hours during the night. One Sabbath morning, his respirator gave out. It quit. I told my wife and children, you go on to church. I've got to take care of this man. So I put him on the rocking bed. I took the respirator apart. I was shocked and horrified what I found. He had to be suctioned every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. I'm glad I had a wife and 8 children who took turns getting up every 15 minutes to suction. Had to stick a 16-inch catheter down his throat and suck the mucus out. Otherwise, he'd choke to death. He couldn't breathe. And so I put him back on a rocking bed, and I took that machine apart. I was horrified when I found just a common vacuum cleaner electric motor. All the air was coming through the electric motor, all the carbon on the brushes being worn down by the armature of the electric motor, all that carbon was coming into his lung, is why he had to be suctioned every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. And I told him, I fixed it, I got the machine running. I told him, I said, Bob, this is a horrible thing. What I did, I went to the hardware store and I got a gasoline filter for a gas line, and I cut the hose in half and put the filter in there. At least it filtered out the carbon. But anyway, I told him, I said, Bob, you're going to die anyway. I said, we might as well start now. I said, I'm going to turn this machine off for a half hour. I said, you're going to breathe on your own or die. And I said, I won't let you die. I'll give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or whatever. We'll keep you alive. And it was pitiful what we went through for the next half hour. But he lived. I said, tomorrow it's going to be an hour. The next day, an hour and a half. In 24 days, he was breathing on his own completely. No, without the respirator, he never got off the rocking bed. There's still 12 hours rocking bed, but at least he never had to be suctioned anymore. To begin with, maybe once every 24 hours until his lungs got cleared out, and then he's okay. Before he left my place, I put him in a wheelchair. I was elder of the local Adventist church. I had him up front. He preached a sermon for me. He could walk. He couldn't stand up, but he could walk. Like I say, he's quadriplegic. He couldn't use his arms or his legs. He could talk. Yeah. Yeah. He could talk. I put a cork in the tracheotomy.
Oh, okay.
And he was able to talk. But anyway, he was so elated to get off of that respirator that he bought a van like they used to carry old people. It's an extra high van you can stand up in. Right. And he hired a chauffeur. He said, I want to see all the national parks in the United States before I die.
Wow.
And so they went traveling, and so the chauffeur was his caretaker, his cook, and his chauffeur, and everything. And so he lived about a year and a half, and then it was sad how it ended. It was winter time. The chauffeur turned the engine off and left him about an hour and a half. He got pneumonia and died. But anyway, God does work miracles. He does teach us what we can do to help others. Well, I want to tell you about his son. He lives in Texas. His son was born and brought up in Adventist, and he got worldly, and he prayed a prayer. Be careful how you pray. He prayed a prayer. He said, Lord, make me like my father so that I can come back to you.
Wow.
He was working in a factory. That very evening, he got in his car to drive back home. A big truck came through a red light, mashed into him. He is quadriplegic.
Oh, my.
Be careful how you pray. This is the other schizophrenic guy.
Did he come back to God? Did the son?
I haven't kept track of him lately, but I do know that he is praying. He's trusting in God, believing in God. He lives in Dallas, Texas. This guy is, I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyway, did any of you know Dr. David Glenn? David Glenn was in charge of the hospital in Loveland, Colorado, and Eden Valley. And he had a lot of confidence in my natural medicine. He had a guy that both legs were burned from his big toe up to 4 inches above the knees. And he knew that I could help that person, so he called me and said, Brother Dence, he was in Colorado and I was in New York. He said, please fly out here and I'll pick you up at midnight in Loveland. And I need you to work on this man with the burned legs. Anyway, to make a long story short, he gave me 2 nurses. He said, these are your helpers. They will stay with you at all times, and this is your patient. Make a long story short, in 2 weeks, we had all new flesh growing on those legs. The doctor broke down and cried like a baby. He said, I've read about this. I knew it could happen, but I didn't know how to make it happen. But when I saw that patient, both legs, from the big toe up to 4 inches above the knees, was a junk pile. I mean, there were blood and plasma and everything all dried and crusted on. There was sulfa drug white. There were bandages that stuck into the plasma and everything. It was just a junk pile. And I had the nurses, one of the nurses run to the hardware store and get 2 tall, narrow garbage cans, plastic garbage cans, and another nurse, I set her to find out if any patient had some powdered golden seal. She found some. I made 5 gallons of golden seal tea. Wow. And anyway, I soaked each leg in a separate narrow trash basket just to get the golden seal up around above the knees. And I found somebody that, one of the nurses found a patient that had some dried, chopped up plantain leaves, and we got some olive oil, and I heated the olive oil. Don't boil it, just heat it good and hot, and I put the plant leaves in for 3 hours, let it simmer, and then I strained it, and one of my nurses found a patient that had a perfume spray rig to spray perfume on. We dumped the perfume out and washed the bottle 20 times to get the smell out. And finally, I put this olive oil plantain ointment in the spray thing. And after I got done soaking, I had the doctor come in. He was a surgeon. I knew I needed help I had to take his boots off. All that crud. I had to start at the top and peel it back, roll it down, and cut the blood vessels that were all stuck and all crusted in the outside skin. I knew I had to have a surgeon for that. We had to, as we pulled the boots down and cut the blood vessels, we had to put hemostats on to keep them from bleeding. And then when I got the boots all off, that's what I call the crud that I took off, he had to cauterize the ends, and then we took the hemostats off. Then I sprayed this plantain ointment all over the legs, and then I took comfrey root, dried comfrey root, very, very healing. I made a gelatin. You cook the root, put it in boiling water, and it makes a gelatin. I took 4 by 4 bandages, opened them up so that they're like 4 by 8. I dipped those into the comfrey gelatin, and I laid them all over the legs like shingles, one right after the other. So both legs were covered, and all parts of both legs up above the knee was covered. Then I took plastic and put on it, and then I put an ace bandage on. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I finished. And 10 o'clock the next morning, I told the nurse to call the surgeon. I want him in here, Dr. David Glenn. He came. And when I took the bandages off, a miracle. Every 3 inches, there's a little white bud, just like that. Just like a bud on a tree, going to grow a limb or a fruit or something. There's these little white buds about 2 or 3 inches apart, all over both legs, overnight. And Dr. Glenn could not hold back the tears. He said, I've read about it, but I've never seen it. Anyway, God is good. So Dr. Glenn said, if you're the doctor I think you are, you will take this man home with you and help him to get well. I said, where is he? He's in a mental institution. How long have you been there? 6 years. Why is he there? Because he tried to kill his mother, he tried to kill his wife, he tried to kill his children, and so they had to lock him up. Been there 6 years. I want you to take him home with you. No, wait a minute. He said, I know you can do it. Well, I said, I don't have the authority to get him out of the hospital. He said, I'll take care of that. I'll have him discharged, and you take him home with you. I had to drive many hours to get home from Colorado to New York. Every time I stopped at a red light, 3 times I stopped at a red light, he jumped out and ran down the road. Oh, no. I mean, a good schizophrenic. And I was 5'8", weighed 150 pounds, and he was 6'4" and weighed 240 pounds. And I had to wrestle him down and leave my car at the red light and run after him, get him back in the car. After the 3rd time, I figured that's enough of this. I hog-tied him, tied his legs together, tied his arms together behind his back, laid him on the back seat, and finally drove the last 14 hours, got safely home to New York. And the first week, he tried to commit suicide. I tried to rescue him from the Suicide Act, and he tried to kill me. He was bigger and heavier than me. This finger, he made a right angle, just like that. He would not let it go. I've always been quite active and gymnastic, and he was bigger than me and taller than me, and he had that finger, and he was going to break it right off. I jumped up in the air and put my legs around his belly, got to squeeze a scissor hole. See, he couldn't breathe, he fainted and fell on the floor, and then he finally let go of that finger. And so his wife and children, 4 children, arrived by then, a week later, and so we decided to put him back in a mental institution, Rochester, New York. I'm telling you this because I'm telling you how God chooses to heal people. And so he was back in a mental institution, and after a week there, this is winter time, Christmas time, his wife and 4 children were with my wife and me and 8 children on my big ranch in New York. Ted called on the phone and said, Dr. Dence, my mother is on the Greyhound bus. She left Colorado and she stopped. I asked her to stop and visit me in the mental institution in Rochester, New York, and we had a good visit, and she is now on the bus, a stormy winter day, heading for Syracuse, New York. Would you please intercept that bus? Invite my mother to come home. My mother has never met my wife and 4 children. That's how the hatred was between them. And I did it. I risked my life in this snowstorm. Fact is, it's blowing so hard that the snow was blowing right straight across. I stopped the car right in the middle of the road. I couldn't see a thing. When the wind died down about 10 minutes later, the front of my car was underneath a tractor trailer. Oh, no. They didn't have the bumpers on the tractor trailer then. They do now. Oh, the back of that truck was 12 inches from my windshield. My hood was right underneath the back of that truck. So God knew when to stop me. So anyway, I brought her home safely and had a hard time finding her. Every woman getting off the bus, I said, is your name so-and-so? I'd never met her. And finally, one of the last ones off, it was her. I put her in my car, took her back to my 400-acre farm where her daughter-in-law and children was there that she had never seen. And I harnessed up a team of horses, hooked them up to a bobsled that I hauled firewood with. I had a cabin down in the woods 2 miles away. And I had a fireplace there, I had beds, I had an outside toilet, I had a spring of water. I loaded up a bunch of food and blankets and put the mother-in-law and the mother and the 4 children, 4 girls, all on the bobsled and took them down to the cabin. I left for 4 days. What a real...
Wow.
What a bunch of healing took place. I went back in 4 days and got them all and brought them back to my house. Took the mother-in-law, back to the Greyhound bus. Went on her way to Boston, Massachusetts for Christmas. A week later, my phone rang. It was Ted. Ted Zelka is his name. He said, Dr. Dence, I have been completely discharged from the hospital. They took me off all medication. Would you come and get me? Wow. I said, I'd be more than pleasure. So I went and got him. Now his wife and 4 children and he are in my home for the next 7 months till springtime. And look what happened. There's Ted, his wife, 4 girls. He drove them back to Colorado. 20 years later, I got a package in the mail. It was a Kodak Retina 3 camera made in Germany. At that time, I'm talking about 1960. And at that time, that was one of the best cameras on the market. And he said, I feel like I owe you something, so this is 20 years later. He'd been working all this time in Boulder Sanitarium, Boulder, Colorado. Anyway, praise God for a rescued family. But again, I'm convinced that schizophrenia, not always, but many times is brought on by hatred. Folks, it's only logical. God is love. The opposite of love is hate. Anybody that hates somebody is devil-possessed. That's the truth. If you hate somebody, you are devil-possessed. And so, we need to learn to love each other. Anyway, God gave us the victory. The guy on the right is the patient, and I got to move along. He was 20 years old, 300 pounds, had to quit college, couldn't walk up and down stairs at the Atlantic Union College, South Lancaster, Massachusetts. And he was in the process of committing suicide. His brother found him, rescued him, brought him to my house. You begin to understand I've had a lot of interesting patients. Brought him to my house and I promised him. I said, if you do what I tell you, you won't have to commit suicide, you won't have to die, you can get well and go back to school. Well, he said he'd do the best he could to cooperate. I planned on putting on 15 days of fasting. Wow. When the water only, when the 15 days is up, his name is Marvin Blank. I said, Marvin, I'm going to have you quit your fast now. He started crying. Please don't have me quit the fast. He said, I've never felt so good in all my life. I said, I'll let you go as long as you promise to quit when I tell you to. He said, okay. On the 37th day, I was running a sawmill. He was still fasting. I couldn't get my truck to the sawmill because I didn't have a snowplow, 2 feet of fresh snow. On the 37th day of his fast, this guy that couldn't walk up and down stairs was wading through 2 feet of snow, carrying hemlock, green hemlock, 2 by 12s, 12 feet long, on his shoulder, carrying him out to the road, loading my truck with lumber. He voluntarily went 59 days water only, lost 80 pounds. I kept him 7 months. He went back to school, graduated as an x-ray technician, got married, and had 3 lovely daughters. That's a lot better than committing suicide. He was a Seventh Adventist. This is Faith House. I took care of her when she was 12 and 14 years old. She had epileptic convulsions. She got completely well, free from drugs and free from convulsions. She got baptized and became a Seventh-day Adventist. Her mother got mad and took the girl away from me and put her back on meat and milk and eggs and fish and chicken. And after 2 months of that bad diet again, she went back having convulsions. She had a convulsion walking to school, fell on the sidewalk. Somebody found her. They didn't have 911 back in those days, but they did something similar. They got an ambulance, took her to the hospital. She became a ward of the state. She's a human guinea pig. She's 70 years old today. She's still alive. Both arms are cut off. Both legs are cut off. She's totally blind in the left eye, deaf in both ears, and has a plastic bladder. She's still alive. Faith House, pray for her. She's baptized Seventh Adventist, but non-Adventists are taking care of her. So it's a great trauma for her, but she's still a happy, lovely person. I went to, Gloria and I went to see her, went last summer, wasn't it? We drove to New York, and she's still alive. So pray for Faith House. She's still a ward of the state, a human guinea pig. They call this disease, the body started rotting, arms and legs rotted right off, and they cut them off. They call it hemodysplasia bullosa. I call it American Dr. Baloney. I mean, they're just experimenting with drugs to see the reaction of different drugs. Because she was one of 16 children without a father, without a known father. And so, anyway, I'm going to tell you something else about her. Actually, she's been in the hospital about a year. She had fever. You're going to call me a liar, but it's the truth anyway. She had a fever of 20 degrees. You can't live beyond 7. But the doctor's 7 degrees. But the doctor was experimenting. To take her temperature, they had to use a candy thermometer. When you make candy with boiling sugar, and her temperature was 20 degrees. A mercury thermometer.
120 more than it should be, or 120?
The normal temperature is 98.6. Okay, 120.
Yeah.
If it goes to 107, they say you can't live. But she was still alive. These wonderful doctors were putting her 8 hours a day in a bathtub with ice cubes soaking, floating. 8 hours a day, trying to bring the temperature down. Listen, I'm a stupid little guy, but I'm smart enough to know that when the thermostat on the wall, when the temperature is cold, the thermostat says turn on the heat.
Yes.
And when it's hot, the temperature says turn off the heat. The doctors weren't smart enough to know that. So they put her in ice, so naturally her body thermostat says turn up the heat. So naturally they got 120 degrees. Anyway, I didn't know anything about that. Her mother knew that I treated her a couple years before, and she got rid of epilepsy and rid of drugs. So the mother kidnapped her from the hospital, brought her to my home, and lied to me. She said, Dr. Dence, Faith has been discharged from the hospital, and I got to make a quick trip to Canada. Would you take care of her for 2 weeks?
Oh boy.
The reason she had to go to Canada, she was escaping the police.
Yeah.
Because she kidnapped her daughter from the hospital. I kept her 2 days before the police finally found out where she was. And 3 cars drove my yard, an ambulance, a doctor, and the police. 3 vehicles drove in. They said, we're not holding you responsible. We found out where the girl is. We've come to get her. But during the 2 days, I knew nothing about this other than what she said herself of the temperature and everything. So I did the logical thing. I put her in a bathtub of water 96 degrees. Or it might have been 97 even. Just a degree and a half lower than normal body temperature. In 2 days, her temperature was perfectly normal. But they had her in this ice water for a whole year, 8 hours every day during the day. I mean, come on. God gave us a brain, we better use it. But anyway, pray for Faith. She's still alive. This is part, she was in the hospital and the doctors were experimenting. They were letting flies crawl on her sores and lay eggs. And the girl said she's about ready to go crazy, that black scab. She said, Doctor, would you please, she was just home for the weekend with her mother, and she talked to her mother into bringing her to my house and remove that black scab. When I did, it was all full of maggots. The flies had laid eggs in there, and the doctors were experimenting to see what maggots can do. And anyway, I took the scab off and treated it, and she was a lot more comfortable. Her urine was more blood than it was urine. I had fun with her one day. Here she is, both legs are off, her right arm is off, and the day after this photo, that's the last day with her left arm on. And one day my wife and I, a medical doctor was sent to catheterize her because she couldn't urinate on her own because she had a plastic bladder. And the doctor was drunk the day he arrived and never did get the catheter in there. He got paid $80 every time he came out to catheterize her, but he was drunk when he came, never did get the catheter in, so she called my wife and me to do the job. I had a little fun with her. There had to be a 2-inch cockroach in the little potty that I drained the water in. And so when I got done draining, I showed her the urine with the cockroach swimming around in it. I said, no wonder you had pain. Look what came out. Just joking with her. But anyway, this girl's lived a pitiful life, all to the tune of experimental doctors. This is the day we left New York and went to Mexico to run a 22-bed hospital. I'd love to take time to tell the story, but I guess I shouldn't do it. This medical doctor, while my wife and I are on a trip, they took that same girl, Faith. He said she had lockjaw. Put her in the hospital 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, he brought her back home, still had lockjaw. That doctor came to my farewell party. We're just leaving the farewell party, heading for Mexico. And the doctor sat beside me and he said, Kelvin, are you really going to go to Mexico and practice your witchcraft on those poor Mexicans? I said, matter of fact, it's the truth. Come on, tell me, when did you ever heal anybody? I said, yes, I will. I said, you remember this girl, Faith? Yes. You diagnosed her with lockjaw? Yes. You brought her back to her house 3 weeks later. She still had lockjaw? Yes. I said, okay. I said, we came home a week later, my wife and I, from a trip. We always traveled. I spent 40 years outside the United States, so anyway, doing missionary work. I said, we came back from a trip, found her with this lockjaw. I gave her a bottle of antispasmodic tincture, page 274 in the Back to Eden book, and I told her to call me when the tincture bottle is empty. She had somebody call me. She still couldn't open her mouth. I knew the tincture would do its job because lockjaw is a spasm of the muscles of the jaw. So antispasmodic tincture's got to do its trick. I knew it would. And so when it took 3 days to empty the bottle, I told her to take 8 to 10 drops every hour that she's awake. It took 3 days to empty the bottle, a 2-ounce bottle. She called me. We went to her house. I knew she loved foot massage. She still could not open her mouth. I knew she loved foot massage, and I did the foot massage, and I mentally remembered where the worst pain was, and when I got all done with the foot massage, I went back to the pain there. I gave a good hard punch. Ow! You can't holler ow without opening your mouth. Her lockjaw was gone. So I told it to the doctor. A bottle of tincture and a foot massage got rid of the lockjaw. He said, you can't cure lockjaw with a massage and tincture. I said, you're the one who diagnosed her, I didn't. He said it was the wrong diagnosis. She never had lockjaw. It went away by itself. They refused to agree that a nature doctor can do something they can't do. Down in Mexico, I treated people with hydrotherapy, massage, chiropractic, fasting, raw food, and herb medication, and everybody got word around he cures people with Jeep. Every Wednesday, I took all my intern patients up in the mountain, 13,000 feet high, and had a great time. So this is my little house up in the mountains in Mexico. I climbed to the peak of that mountain 3 times. This is a medical advice. On the way up, I was on the 4th day of a fast, and I was carrying a 40-pound pack sack on my back. And I fainted and passed out with low blood sugar. My son Stephen is a nature doctor in Texas. He happened to be with us, and he had a bottle of honey, a small jar of honey. He stuck his finger in there and got his finger all covered in honey, stuck it down my throat, painted my tongue and my throat with the honey. I woke up, put my pack sack on, and continued up the mountain. This is the back end of the hospital that I ran down in Mexico. And this is the back porch. The front porch is just like it. The building is about 200 feet long, 75 feet wide, 2 stories high. Beautiful, beautiful building. That's my youngest son sitting on the back step. Here's a couple hippies. They were hitchhiking. She was 9 months and 2 days pregnant. They sheepishly asked, do you deliver babies? I said, yes, like right now. Get in here. And we delivered a baby. They said, we don't have any money. I said, no problem. You weed my garden, I'll take care of you and the baby. They stayed a month, bought another pack sack, and hitchhiked down to New York. Anyway, Steve on the left, I think I told you the story. He was inspired by what I was doing, and he's a famous chiropractor today in Escondido, California. This is my office. This is my wife. That's the back half of the hospital. The children named the cat 1492. I don't know why. Must have been related to Columbus. This is my wife and my granddaughter. This little girl now has a baby. This 20-some years old and just had a baby, so it'd be my great-great-grandchild. I have 8 children, 12 grandchildren, and 1, I don't know how many grandchildren, 1 great-great-grandchild anyway. That was tangerine that they were picking. This is the pastor's wife on the left, and my son at the hospital in Mexico. The big tuber by my son's left knee is a wild squash root, calabacita. It means little squash. And I renamed it Cancerina. And what they're doing is cutting it up, drying it, and then I powder it, make a real fine powder, put it in capsules, 1 capsule a day. I took 800 patients off insulin. 1 capsule a day would control their sugar. That's my little house in Mexico where I lived right next to the hospital, but I couldn't stay there because 24 hours a day is a big, busy bus route. People get me out any hour of the night and get me out of bed. Oh, no. And so I had to move 18 miles away back in the country. A young girl learning herbs, and the chickweed, she had the straw hat on, she was complaining of the heat. Well, I said, you dummy, get rid of that straw hat and put some chickweed on top of your head. I'm teaching her the law of refrigeration. The law of refrigeration is evaporation causes cooling. You can't evaporate anything out of a straw hat. But with chickweed, you can evaporate the green juices in the leaves with the sun shining on it, the wind blowing through it, a nice, cool hat. And while we lived right there, this was the kitchen roof. While we lived there, my wife and I remember when the oranges came in a divided orange crate, wooden orange crate, years ago, back in the 50s and 60s anyway. I took an orange crate, hung it up in an orange tree, put a dishpan of water on top. I opened up a burlap bag and wrapped it around and stuck the ends in the water on top of the box, and the burlap bag draped around the box, and all summer on a hot weathered day, it's 46 degrees inside there. Evaporation causes cooling. And so you've got to make use of these laws. They're beneficial. This is the little house I built out in the country to get away from the bus line at night. Back to the dog, here's a German Shepherd, and I tried to be vegetarian. One day the men working on the road gave him a bone, and he came walking home proudly with that bone in his mouth. His name was Goliath. That means Goliath in Spanish. Goliath, what are you doing with that bone? He put his head down, turned around, walked back to a bush, dug a hole and buried it. So he was a conscientious vegetarian. This is the inside. My wife's standing there by the door. This is in Chiapas, southern Mexico. I built that church there, a stone front on it. These are Chamula Indians. I helped a young girl, 18 years old. She got in Spanish, a beca, what is it, a scholarship to become a medical doctor to the Chamula Indian people, and I helped pay her way. Also, they gave her the scholarship, but they didn't give her any money for food. She was selling her blood in order to buy food. My wife and I went to see her and gave her 3,000 Mexican pesos so she could buy food and not have to sell her blood. And she's a famous medical doctor today in California. This is one of my patients. She was a lab technician. She made drugs so she could stay awake and pass her exam, and then she made her own drugs to try to make her sleep. She messed up her system. It took me 3 years to get her straightened out. I finally got her sleeping fine without sleeping pills and without drugs. This is the hospital staff. Right to left is yours, Julie, and then my wife, Ursula. Then at this time, she was just my receptionist. Now she's my daughter-in-law, Chaito. And then the other is Margarita Limon. She was just a patient and a student. I was teaching her natural medicine. She's now a graduate medical doctor. This is inside my office, all my jars of herbs for medicine. This lady had diabetic gangrene. She didn't want to give up eating meat. I said, there's nothing I can do for you. And she went home and she died 11 days later. This is Chaito's sister, Martha. She had myasthenia gravis. She's taken prostaglandin, a very serious drug. Any medical doctor tell you that the same hour that you don't take prostaglandin, you will drop dead. This girl wanted to get off of prostaglandin, and she talked to her doctor, she talked to her pastor, she talked to her mother, and she talked to me. I said, if you want to do it and they all agree, let's see what we can do. We got her off the drug. I can't go into all the details, but she would have choked to death and died, but I had to catheterize her throat. I had to stick a suction tube down her throat, turn on an electric motor, pump the mucus out. But she finally got through that, lived 4 beautiful years without drugs and without other medicine and without the symptoms of myasthenia gravis. Jacqueline Kennedy married the Grecian boatmaster, and he died of myasthenia gravis. I'll finish the story. She spent 3 years cooking in my hospital. She's afraid to go anyplace, afraid she'd get back into myasthenia gravis again. And so finally she went and lived a year with my son and her sister. And then she went back to live with her mother, and her mother put her back on eggs and milk and cheese, fish and chicken, and she died. You can't go backwards, you got to go forward. This is Don Bedoya. I knew every boat in the Metro River in South America. Don Bedoya got 20 tons of potatoes. Anyway, on Sabbath morning, he hit a rock and broke his rudder right off. He couldn't steer the boat. And so it's the only time I ever worked on Sabbath. I had a welding outfit on my boat, and I welded together and installed a whole new rudder so that he could get his potatoes delivered. This is on my boat showing Bible pictures at night with a projector. All you can see is the light of the projector. 61 people sitting on the front of my boat watching the picture. Sunrise and sunset on the Metro River every day. Beautiful. Here's my hospital boat. The only way I was able to make money to keep the expenses paid was I'd take tractors across the river on the front of my boat. And the biggest load I ever took was a D10 Caterpillar. And the boat put up with it. I laid planks on this so I wouldn't damage the metal. And then I had planks from the shore to the boat. I drove the tractor down on there and went across the river and drove it off. And they paid me well. My wife's in my bedroom is upstairs on the second floor, and that's where I operated the boat. We drank rainwater. Once a week we'd scrub and wash the upper roof. We had a 100-gallon tank, a white tank right behind the building, where we caught our drinking water. This is the laundromat. My wife and one of the nurses are out in the boat in the middle, tied to the log upstream to hold it. The water in the middle of the river is cleaner than the water on the side. The water on the side, the boats go by, it washes the shore and makes the water muddy. But in the middle, the water's cleaner. There's my wife's flower bed on the boat. This is Christmas Day. We're stopping tied up to that rock to get Christmas dinner. This is Sanson. The big boat carry 1,000 cows. Two-decker boat, 500 cows on top and 500 on the bottom. I could tell you a beautiful cowboy story, but our time is running out. Ellen White said when she had visions of heaven, everything looked like silver and gold. I thought of that with this picture. It looks like silver and gold. That's the Metro River. This is my wife explaining to an Indian chief of the Cueva Indians in South America how to use herbs. It should be the other way around. The Indians should be teaching us how to use herbs. The girl in the pink blouse was a Catholic girl that volunteered to spend a year, ended up 3 years on my boat. Very intelligent girl. She never, to my knowledge, ever became an Adventist. But a soldier came on the boat one day, uniform and a gun, and started flirting with her. And she looked at him and said, "Does your wife know where you are?" And she turned around, walked in the boat, and refused to talk with him anymore. And then a policeman came on board with a uniform and a cigarette in his mouth and a gun, and started flirting with her. And she said, "We Adventists don't smoke." She grabbed a cigarette out of his mouth and threw it in the river. So there's more than one way to stop a person from smoking. Should I take a moment, or did I tell you how I helped 10,000 people quit smoking in 5 seconds?
No.
Quickly, I'll go through the story. It's a matter of 68 years that I treated. 18 years, I was administrative doctor of a hospital. And 68 years, I treated sick people. And when people would come and say, "We want to be interned in your hospital," I'd say, "I have the right place, the right medicine, the right experience. I can help your case, but I cannot accept you as a patient." "Why?" I said, "Because you're a smoker. I can see the cigarettes in your pocket. I can smell the smoke, the cigarettes, tobacco on your breath. I can't treat a smoker. I said, you go home and quit smoking for 30 days, come back with a witness to sign a paper you haven't smoked in 30 days, I'll take you on as a patient. But doctor, I'm sick right now. Please take me on now. Please, I'm sick. I need help. I said, okay, I'm prepared for him. I opened my desk, pull out a paper. I said, read this. I said, if you sign that paper, I'll take you on as a patient. And the paper says I will not smoke, I will not use tobacco, I won't use alcohol, I won't eat any animal products, I won't take any drugs. And if they sign it, here comes the 5 seconds. I reach out and take their hand. I say, congratulations, you've already smoked your last cigarette. Because the paper said they're going to put themselves under my care 30 days. I know what's going to happen during the 30 days. They'll never want to see or smell another cigarette. Completely detoxify the body. As long as one bit of nicotine is in any cell in your body, you cannot quit smoking. It would be some kind of a different miracle if you did. But anyway, and God does use miracles. This is the boat again. Oh, by the way, I had my motorcycle on board, and when I had to go on land, I had to go down the plank. And when I came back, I had to go up the plank. 8 years we lived on that boat and ran it. Only twice me and the motorcycle went in the river. I've had the privilege of treating 11 women with lumps in the breast. I don't know if they're cancerous or not, but half of them had had previous surgery, had the lumps taken out, but they came back. The other half never had surgery, but all 11, within 30 days, was completely free from lumps in the breast. And I did the same thing with this. I treated this just like it would a lump in the breast. And the way I treat it is this little girl, I thought I had a picture of her. I do later. All right. This little girl, I had the privilege of baptizing her. She worked for me for 3 years on my boat as a nurse's aide. And she had this terrible tumor on her throat. I treated that just like I do lumps in the breast. It's 15 days of putting a different poultice on every 12 hours. Every 11 hours. 1 hour of alternate hot and cold fomentations, then 11 hours of a herbal poultice, then again in the evening, 1 hour of alternate hot and cold fermentation, and then another 11 hours of poultice. It takes 15 days to turn that tumor to pus. It'll open up itself and drain out. And let me show you the drainage. That's my wife squeezing the last bit of pus out. When that broke open, got a cup and a half of green and yellow pus out of that. And was she happy or what? No scar, no tumor. It's gone, yes.
What was the poultice made of? What was the poultice made of?
Different every time. Sometimes a raw potato poultice, sometimes a charcoal poultice with slippery elm bark mixed with it to make it stick together.
What kind of bark?
Slippery elm bark powder. And sometimes a mixed herb poultice, sometimes a clay poultice. Whatever's drawing, whatever will break down the lumps in the breast or whatever's in the tumor. I had a baby, 6 months old. I got a picture someplace, I don't think it's here. He fell out of the high chair on a cement floor, had a gigantic hematoma on the top of his head, about 4 inches
Oh.
diameter, a big thing. I treated it the same way. It disappeared the same circumstance. This is one of the rivers I worked on. Here's going between the jungle and Bogota, high mountains. Once or twice a year, a bus would go down and kill all the people. Before they put that cement there, I took a picture of a bus. The dual tire was hanging off the edge of the concrete before they put that barrier there. See the water way down below. That's a long ways, about a half a mile down. About once or twice a year, a whole busload of people will be down there. This is my hospital boat in action. It was the prettiest boat on the river. This is the home of the Cueva Indians. The day I pulled up here, there were 34 babies, had a epidemic of vomiting and diarrhea and fever. And when I pulled up on my big hospital boat, 35 men, husbands of the 35 women, jumped on one side of my boat. You can't do that. That boat had a Series 53 Detroit diesel engine in it, automatic transmission. When those men jumped on it, the boat started to roll right over. Yep. I put it in reverse automatic transmission and gassed it, and all 35 men fell in the river. But it saved their lives and saved my life too. Yeah. God has to work fast sometimes to tell you what to do. But anyway, I had another appointment. The Major General of the Cavalry Army of Colombia had fallen and hurt his back. I was on my way to treat him when they flagged me down, these 35 women with babies, sick. Because of my being in a hurry to help the Major General of the Cavalry Army, I mixed up half and half honey and charcoal. For every cup of honey, I put a cup of charcoal, mixed it all up. I had a whole bunch of sterilized 4-ounce Gerber's baby food bottles for the purpose. I filled up 34 or 35, how many babies there were, jars. I couldn't talk to the women, because I don't know the Indian language. These are the, I think they're Chamorro Indians. Anyway, I told the captain, he spoke Spanish, I said, tell the mothers to give a teaspoonful every hour until the jar is empty. So they did that. I saw them give the first teaspoonful. They blah, 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 blah. They wiped the charcoal all over their face, everything with their hands. But I said, I'll be back in 3 days. If anybody's sick, I'll give further treatment. So each mother had a jar of charcoal and honey for the baby. I went and treated the Major General of the Army and gave him hot fomentation and a chiropractic adjustment. And I said, let's have a prayer and then I got to go back and take care of these babies. And we knelt down and he said, yes, I will pray, he said. When we got done praying, we stood up and he said, I was born and brought up with 7 daughters. I went back, stopped right here, tooted my horn. I told the captain of the tribe of Indians that I would toot when I came back. And if anybody's sick, have them come on down to the boat. I tooted, nobody came. So I tied up the boat and went and looked up. You don't talk to an Indian until you get permission from the chief first. So I talked to him. I said, I tooted, nobody came. Why not? He said, because nobody's sick. So all those babies got well with just a Gerber's baby food bottle of charcoal and honey.
I wanted to ask you about the honey. I've always heard that it's dangerous to give to babies under the age of 2, but I don't know why. And did the charcoal...
I know why. Because a child's liver is not enough developed to handle honey until they're 2 years old. After 2 years, the liver is developed enough to handle it. And what's in general, what is in commercial honey would be insecticide, DDT or something like that. But I saw to it that I bought wild honey that was out away from rice fields and apple orchards and stuff like that. I bought wild honey that had no poison spray in it. And so children can handle wild honey. I had my own bees when my children were little. And my children were all brought up on honey. Never had any trouble. But that's a medical precaution because they know that honey has insecticide in it. How old is this lady? Her name is Evangelista Gaitan. She and her husband built the first building, a little cabin on the banks of the Monocasillas River, and today there's a city of 5,000 people there in this picture. Her daughter was 70 years old and told me her mother's sick and needed help. I said, "Where's your mother?" "In the hospital." "Well, that's no place to treat a sick person. You get her out of the hospital and I'll treat her." And so she took her mother home. I found out she had serious pain in her back. I gave her 1 hour alternate hot and cold fomentations, gave her a chiropractic adjustment. She felt perfectly fine. I came back a year later, and she was out hoeing in the garden. Wow. If you've never seen a Spanish hoe, you don't know what a hoe is like. Weighed about 10 pounds. Cast iron, about 10 inches wide. A big 1.5 inch handle in it, made out of a limb of a tree. Anyway, in this picture, when I treated her when she was 6, she's 125 years old. Oh, and I came back a year later, she's out hoeing in the garden, she's 126. Oh, there's a 125-pound stalk of bananas. Wow. Delicious bananas. There's my wife, and every year we took 2 boys and 2 girls with us to train them to be nurses and mechanics and medical missionaries. And we trained many, many young people down in Colombia, South America. We had to work on the boat. It was a metal boat. It'd get rusty, and the paint would come off. I had to take a torch and cut that all out and weld in a new piece of metal. Then I had to put 3 different layers of waterproof paint on it. I did dental work. I never went to dental school a day in my life. But God showed me how to do dental work. That's the before. This is after. Wow. Never cost her a penny. A beautiful story. A Catholic teacher in a Catholic school asked me to come and teach Revelation in his school. For 2 or 3 weeks, I got by with it. And all of a sudden, one day I was there teaching, and the priest walked in, walked right up to the teacher and said, "Young man, I'll have you know I'm the only one who's allowed to teach religion in this school." He turned around and walked out. The teacher came to me trembling and said, "You got to leave now." And the priest was already on ahead. And the teacher came up, tapped me on the shoulder. He whispered, "Are you going to be on the boat 3 o'clock this afternoon?" I said, "Yes." He said, "My children would like a boat ride." And I said, "Okay, I'll be waiting for you." There's 2.5 miles from the village down to the river. So he came marching down with the children with their uniforms on and got on my boat. I cranked up the engine. We got downriver, around the corner, out of the side of the village. He tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "We don't want a boat ride. We want to hear more about Revelation."
Amen.
Everything in heaven, Ellen White said, looked like silver and gold. Biggest catfish I ever saw. You've never seen a catfish that big. 12 feet long. His mouth was 14 inches from one side to the other. Without any insides in him, he weighed 325 pounds. These boys sold that fish for $1 a pound. There's another picture. I mean, that's a pole 12 feet long, and their knees are buckling. Each one is carrying about 160 pounds or something like that. These are sisters, Colombian, native Colombian girls, and they worked with me for a year, learning natural medicine and helping out. The boy on the right, the taxi driver, he was 11 years old. He's the only person other than my wife and me, the only ones that ever navigated that big boat. I taught him how to do it.
Wow.
He did a beautiful job. And here he's a taxi driver today, pulling his little kids around. He cut the sides out of those plastic 5-gallon cans and throwing the kids in the sand. Here's 2 years later, the same two little girls, and they're carrying a basket full of fish from their daddy. It took me a long time to figure out what I was looking at. These are the Andes Mountains, and the river is the Meta River, is 125 miles east of the Andes Mountains. And every night I'd see this sunset. Finally I figured out what it was. The rays of light coming through the sky is the valley between the mountains.
Oh, wow.
Letting the sunset shine through the valley. And the shadow, the dark spot, is the peak of the mountain making a shadow in the sky. 125 miles away. Here's the same stop off of the Cuiva Indians. And this is the same group of Cuiva Indians. That's the captain with the checkered shirt on. Yeah, that's my wife Ursula sitting there teaching how to use the drugs, herbs. And these are part of the 35 mothers that came with the babies that have the epidemia, fever and diarrhea. And there's a cute story of this little girl with no shirt on, right in the front, in the middle. That's her mother with the baby in the background. On a Friday night, I was looking to park my boat because we never traveled on Sabbath. And when do you guys have dinner? 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
Should I just turn this off? Or?
Oh, it's almost 1, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, this little girl was 2 days old, and the mother came running to the boat and said, "Please, doctor, come help me. My baby's dying." The doctor, in delivering the baby, had put 2 fingers under her chin and 1 hand on the back of her head. He ruptured an artery in her neck. She had a gigantic hematoma. Her throat looked like a frog. You know how a frog will blow up her throat when it makes a noise? And she couldn't breathe. She couldn't nurse. And 2 days old. There's a plant called heliotrope that is a part of the family of comfrey. Yeah, it has a little curl on the end with graduated flowers. And it's edible. You can cook it and eat it. And the leaves will do the same thing as comfrey. Very, very healing. Anyway, I ran down along the bank of the river, found some heliotrope, came back, and I had an old meat grinder. I washed the green leaves and dried them with a paper towel, and then ran them through the old meat grinder and ground them up. And I put the green mass right on the throat like a poultice, and I covered it with it was on a cloth, like a baby diaper or something, and I put it on the throat, and put a saran wrap around, and then I put a dry towel around and pinned it so it stayed on all night. I stayed there 3 days and 3 nights. The baby was completely well. The hematoma disappeared, went away. This is 6 years later. She's healthy and well. The only thing is, the damage the doctor did when he ruptured that, and damaged her vocal cords, she had a voice like a smoking man. Otherwise, she was healthy and strong. This is breast cancer. I refused to take her on as a patient because she was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and I told her there's nothing she didn't want to quit smoking, so I said there's nothing I can do for her. This is an after picture, and here's,
Your slide got
So the big smiley face, that was the lady that had breast cancer?
something stuck.
Yep. It won't even turn?
Nope.
Oh boy.
That must be fine.
Where's the end? Am I almost done? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like this slide is
Yeah.
stuck down there.
I'll take care of that later. Anyway, I have.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
there it is. Okay. I don't know what happened. Anyway, this, I made a partial plate for her. I'll just run through it quickly. This is the little girl that had the tumor on her neck. I built a cement tower to hold those water tanks up. There's a beautiful story there, but I won't take time to tell it. I'm transporting the gravel to build the tower for the water tanks. That's the water tanks all finished. Okay, hold on.